Welcome to another edition of ALN Thursday at 3. Today we have two guests that have been on our program before. You might be familiar with Rick Justis, who's the Executive Director for the for Smarter Buildings Foundation, and his longtime colleague and collaborator, co-conspirator even, Anto Budiarjo, president of Patty.io, which is an ALN organizational member. And I'll get into what we're going to be talking about in just a moment. But first, we always like to thank our organizational members, starting with our patron members, Jacobs, Mantech, ABS Quality Evaluations, CGI, and Onuma Inc., and all of our organizational members. We wouldn't be able to do these types of programs and take on these highly impactful initiatives without our members, and we're really happy to be highlighting them today and in this series of webinars this fall. This series has a really interesting culmination next week, where we present the PAE Livable Building Pilot Project. Stephen Lothrop, the electrical engineer from PAE Engineers, is going to be a key speaker, but they're going to be ALN organizational members who are participating in that pilot project that's demonstrating what is possible. We're not just talking about things in theory. And I want to take a minute before we start talking with Anto and Rick to talk about this series that we've been having. This is a pale substitute to the summit that we were going to have in the U.S. Capitol Building Conference Center next week, but the government shutdown just made that too difficult and impossible. So we've been doing it on the web, and we've been saying that the data handover and exchange conditions in the building industry, the infrastructure industry, is at crisis mode. It is needing to be addressed. If this one issue of better information exchange is addressed, we can really transform things. And we started by saying that it's up to the owners. We're not blaming the architects. We're not blaming the engineers. We're not blaming the contractors, operators, maintenance people, anything. Owners have created this crisis because they're not requiring proper data handover and exchanges. And even when they do require it, they are not enforcing it. And so the first program we had was about the asset data structure standard that we are writing under the Linux Foundation. That is what needs to be done. The owners have to do that. Then last week, we talked with ALN organizational members from Skycentrics and Onuma and talked about the why. You've got a data structure standard. You want to have your smart assets talk to each other better and give you information better, but why? What is the business process model that will help you get from having structured data standard to the how of what the Linux Foundation is setting up? How do you get your smart assets to talk to each other and to the grid? And through the efforts of Anto and Rick, this Coalition for Smarter Buildings has collected people who know how to address this. And so we can confidently go to Congress, to all of our legislators, and say appropriation bills need to have language that says something like use secure, open software standards to connect your smart assets, let them communicate with each other, and use open standard business processes to make these things flow together. And we're saying it overly simple, but it's hugely complex. Luckily, we have Rick and Anto who have been working together for so long that they know how to address this. And Rick and Anto, I'm going to ask you just before you introduce yourself or anything, is my excitement appropriate? Things are happening in ways that haven't happened before. Rick, you took your microphone live first, so we'll let you talk first.
I buzzed in, right?
Yes, right.
Um, yeah, things are happening in a different way that people are becoming aware of the fact that there's decisions that can probably be made better. They're becoming aware of technology that potentially can help with the better management, better decision making. Um, the good news is, from a technologist standpoint, is that they're right. The technology that they're hearing about is actually new and different and more able to fit into the business needs. Um, so again, as a technologist, it's like, whew, yeah, the technology's advanced now. We actually
Excellent.
can do things in a different way. Yeah.
Excellent. Anto, what's your read on the temperature of the industry and what's happening? You've been addressing communication among programs and software for a while. Do you
Yeah,
feel?
for 30 years. I think there's definitely clearly a lot of new technology and new approaches and new sort of ways of doing things. But I think what's sort of interesting, and in a way we have COVID to thank for this,
Okay.
is that when we were going through COVID, we were being told the importance of data for all of our lives, right? And we were tracking it, and it was kind of annoying because you had to wait 2 weeks before it's safe or not, right? That's how data works, right? So I think what the reason why I'm bringing that up is that it's taught people the value of data, and it's taught people the value of data when you structure it in such a way that you can use it to help you make decisions on your life, which was obviously the case with COVID, but it's sort of, I think once it goes into our heads that we need to think about data that way, that's never going to go away.
Excellent. So last year, about this time, the Asset Leadership Network signed a memorandum of understanding with the Coalition of Smarter Buildings. Can you both talk a little bit about the start of the coalition, what your thoughts were before we get to the exciting part, which is when Linux said, yes, we want you. Anto first this time?
Well, C4SB actually, the sort of the seed of C4SB is in Rick's head, right? So he should really start.
Okay, that's all right. Pass to Rick.
Well, this goes back how many years? And I think we have COVID to thank for this too. God, that's terrible. But so there was a group of people getting together under Anto's leadership doing this thing called Monday Live, which a lot of you probably seen. And I was watching that and saying, wow, this group of thought leaders in the industry could maybe come together in a little bit more official, functional way to be able to go solve some of the problems of getting technology moving quicker in our industry. And so it looked like there was this group of people getting together on a regular basis, that if we sort of added a technology direction and vision, um, that we have the best of both worlds. So, a group of thought leaders plus a little bit of a technology seed. And so we formed a nonprofit of C4SB to be the place where some of these the Brain Trust could come and work on specific technology problems.
And
In the
what were some of the specific technology problems you wanted to address?
Anto, do you remember?
I think the very first project was 2525, right? Which is to do with Division 25 specifications. We sort of identified that if we have to think about bringing various systems together, there has to be a way of specifying that, or even thinking about how to specify it. So we've obviously known about the existence of master format and the importance of that in terms of the construction process. And we know about Division 25, which was put in there specifically to help with this integration, right? So we picked up on that, and the other thing is that we also noticed that people weren't really creating Division 25 specifications unless it's a huge building with huge budgets. And one of the sort of realizations is that that doesn't scale, right? So we have to sort of productize it and make it much smoother. And that was kind of the trigger of saying, okay, we need to look at this Division 25 and see what we can do to help make it smoother.
Yeah, and that then naturally brought us to some reference models of technology that could be specified and replicated. So we had a school and a fire station and an office building, and we kind of created specifications that could be replicated. So that was some of the first work. And because again, it was like there's something holding back the industry from implementing technology. Is it business process? Is it specifications? Is it reference models? It may not be the technology itself being absent, but here's the paths to how to implement technology was sort of how we got our start. And then when we added more sort of work to the roster, more smart people came by. It's like, hey, what could I do to help? Oh, here's some work that we could add. That's when the Linux Foundation, I'm not sure who found who. I think we went looking, we ended up finding the Linux Foundation. They found
Rumor has it that Toby Considine
Yeah.
recommended it, and that you said, good idea, Toby, and went and hound dogged them.
They immediately, or should we go transition to that
Sure.
part?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So it was to our delight. I think it was Anto and I. Maybe there was one other person on the call where we got a hold of some people who were already involved in Linux at the highest levels. It turned out, and they said, "Well, we've been thinking about how we, as the Linux Foundation, can bring our how we can bring the Linux Foundation to the world of cities and buildings and infrastructure assets, if you will." And I think Anto and I were looking at each other, just like we're looking at each other now, going, "I think we've got the framework for that." And we then presented to them that our goal was to create these technology frameworks and models that would accelerate the adoption of in an open way, in an open standards and open source based way. We were already headed that non-proprietary, no vendor lock-in. Everybody that was working with us was sort of committed to the community-based future rather than a proprietary based futures. And yeah, they were like, well, that matches up with what we're doing. We'd like you to sort of take the lead in defining how the Linux Foundation can be useful and transformative in the world of the built environment. And it was like, well,
Right.
awesome.
All right, let's take a moment and just reflect on that, because that was such a natural connection. And I put up the link for Monday Live, which is Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, that Anto leads a consistent group of industry leaders who have wide-ranging yet specifically informative discussions about monthly topics that Anto facilitates. And it is that open sharing. People are giving away their ideas and trying to come up with solutions to the topics. It starts off every program with the report from Ken Sinclair, who is the publisher of Automated Buildings. And it's an excellent format for sharing ideas, and I recommend it to anybody, whether you're in the building industry or not. There's a lot to learn from that. And so here are these group of sharing people who get into the Linux Foundation. And I've been wanting building industry change for decades also. And once the Coalition for Smarter Buildings was in the Linux Foundation, things took off. We announced it February. Yeah, it was just February this year. And people who showed up to the public, announcement are working together now on this pilot project. And solutions, people are scratching heads, there's frustration, but everybody's working together in ways that I have not seen before. And I was wondering, what's going on here? And then it was like, oh, duh, the Linux Foundation develops open standards. So everybody involved in this is an open person who is interested in sharing to make things better for everybody. And yes, I can put a cherry on top of what I want to do to differentiate what you put on top of your open code, but it's about moving the industries forward. And then Rick, and we gotta mention Pete. Pete is so critical to all this. Put together Peter Scanlon, got to say that full. Put together a slide presentation that anybody could use for different types of introductions of what's going on. And the slide about the industries that the Linux Foundation has already transformed in this open manner, it's just huge. Rick, are you reaching? Should I get that? We don't have to do a slide. This is discussion. We don't want to be doing PowerPoints. But no. the Linux Foundation has had transformative benefits in the telephone industry, in the web server industry, and the one that really blew me away, the motion picture industry.
Yeah.
It turns out that Pixar wanted to be able to send huge files, to have somebody put color, somebody put sound, somebody put special effects. So the motion picture industry came together under the guidance of one large entity and sat down and hammered it out. And they've established a standard for data sharing in the motion picture industry.
And who would stop and think about the fact that the motion picture industry is actually a data industry? It's actually a technology industry. You'd think we all still, well, I do, I'm old. I think of it like as film and a, Charlie Chaplin kind of thing. It's not. It's a technology industry, the same as transportation is, and how banking is, and even hospitals are information businesses, or they think of themselves as.
So this is a perfect transition, right? So I've talked about the building industry for years, saying that the majority of the buildings in the world are made with mud. There are so many people who are living under plastic. The building industry is huge. It's not just the U.S. cities with high rises and trains and things like that. The building industry is very diverse. When the airline industry needed to get together and decide to call O'Hare Airport ORD, there were about 24 airlines. It wasn't hard to have them hammer things out. The motion picture industry, ruthless competition, but still, just a handful of major players. Well, every city has hundreds of architects, hundreds of engineers, probably even thousands of contractors. The diversity in the building industry is huge, and therefore slower to adopt change is one way of looking at it.
Yeah, it is interesting in that the number of entities that had to be on board to change the transportation, cars, just let's say cars, to change the transportation industry was actually a large number. The number of people that had to be involved to get the motion picture was reasonably large, but what we're looking at with the buildings and real estate and smart cities for that matter, it's like, let's just think about all the contractors and all the engineers and all the architects, everybody using tools differently, building no two buildings are ever the same. No two systems are engineered the same way. So in trying to take a one size fits all approach to an industry like this, that's not going to work. You have to have the flexibility of the technology
But
model.
but 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 also buildings haven't. I mean, the reason why you can say that, Rick, is that we're looking at buildings from a life cycle, from everything that happens from a building perspective, from before it was designed to operations. And I'm not sure people have looked at buildings that way before. People have looked at buildings as being transactional. I'm a builder, or I
Yeah.
install desks, or I fix boilers, or whatever it is. So it's been a sort of series of transactional things. And that's not very fair if you start to think of the building as an asset, because that's not the best way of looking after an asset. You don't look at things sort of tactically. You sort of think of the whole thing, which is what we're trying to do, and that's sort of the big difference
And thank
with the
you for
approach.
saying that, because
Yeah.
we're saying this on the Asset Leadership Network Thursday at 3 program. So it fit in perfectly with the
Yeah.
new concept of an asset is anything that gives value to an organization, that was published through ISO in 2014. So in the course of human history, this is still a very new concept to standardize and promulgate through industries. And involvement with the Coalition for the Smarter Buildings really helps the Asset Leadership Network, because another human issue is siloed thinking. And siloed thinking allowed us to have brain surgeons that help us fix things that were never being able to be fixed before, heart issues that were never being addressed before, and foot things, so
Yeah.
silos helps advance individual industries. But this calling an asset something that gives value to the organization makes people, or allows people, to step back and look at the entire body and see how healthy feet leads to healthy heart to healthy mind. And they're all connected, and you're not looking at things transactionally. So it's been beautiful to have you. One of the things that's an issue in the Asset Leadership Network is there are people who are looking at personal property versus people who are looking at facility assets versus and the work of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings allows smart assets to talk with each other, share data and reports in ways that leaders can make decisions, and then share information with the infrastructure grid to balance supply and demand in ways that haven't been possible before.
Yeah, and just to echo the life cycle approach to it, we as the coalition, when we first started imagining what the issues were that needed to be solved, we were already thinking about life cycle and not and how the different approaches were consistent, because everything does get designed. It does use energy. There's these common things that happen throughout the life cycle. And then to solve for how the specific buildings that are all designed different, that all use different devices, but to solve for the specifics, but to keep in mind the bigger picture of how does data or information affect the flight path of the asset. Mixing metaphors here, um, but if you think about it as like, where are we trying to make sure that the building goes in the best possible direction, and uses the right amount of resources to do it, it just brings a different thinking. So in partnering with the Asset Leadership Network, it just made sense to say we have been thinking about things, assets across time forever, and then thinking about the technologies that plug in to bring uh, better guidance or better energy use or better design practices. It just kind of fit into their part of the life cycle. Um, and again, a key part of it, though, and everybody should have confidence that we are paying attention to the details of How do the data standards evolve to be able to solve all parts of the silos? How does the communication standards that we're picking, how does that fit? But what we do like is we don't have to get into all the details of all of that stuff. We can kind of give people a confidence of we're doing it under the Linux approach to solving problems. So therefore it is a community inclusiveness. It's not designed to be proprietary and exclusionary and that, so that level of confidence is a part that we like to highlight, is that, yeah, we're solving all these problems, but we're doing it in a way that should be inclusive and open.
So let's talk about inclusivity and openness. Just put up the website for the Coalition for a Smarter Building, and want to make sure I got it right. c4sb.org.
I hope. I can't see it.
Yes, it is. That's
Okay,
good.
great. And we are looking for people to participate. It's been an honor for the ALN to be a driver of a pilot project program where we're looking for owners to bring their building needs to teams of people. We've got a pilot project network in the ALN, and we work with the Linux Foundation people. So many of basically the people in the ALN are also participating in the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. And if you are an owner and you want to see about this, you can reach out to us, and we can give you an executive briefing to help you understand where to go and then guide you to setting up a pilot project. And that is the lead-in. Oh, and consultants who want to be participating and can get their familiar with what's going on, reach out, and we will bring you in to the fold and help understand how you can contribute. Rick, did you want to say, sounded like something you wanted to say about the coalition?
Oh, are you sharing a screen? I can't see it if you are.
Oh,
okay,
no.
good. Okay. Sorry for the cough. The pilot, the pilot concept of being able to say, let's get some more buildings where we can apply the specifics of the technology inside the concept of the asset approach. Yeah, we're excited about getting some more participants in that. We're also excited about getting some more technology providers that are being attracted to what we're doing to be able to say, hey, we've got this technology, how does it fit into this kind of building? And so we're rapidly building the ecosystem of the building owners and the technology providers, all with a common understanding of the open systems and open standards, open approach.
Well, that's a perfect transition to the program next week, which is going to focus on what has been achieved in the PAE Engineers Livable Building pilot project, the rapidly developing capabilities, which it's incredible to see how fast and furious these opportunities are developing, and then the long-term reach goals for the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. So, Anto, do you want to make any comments about how the pilot project has been useful to the effort to get people to be interested in watching next week?
Yeah, I think the first thing to note about that pilot project is that some engineers from that company actually searched us out actually back at the beginning of the year at the AHR Expo, because and Rick's going to go in a little bit more about what the building is, but they built this building in Portland, lovely building, not very large, just 50,000 square feet, so it's a good sized building, but not huge. And they built it with a lot of expectations of new sustainable equipment, right? But they were having really a challenge of thinking about the data and using the data the way they were expecting to. right? So they knew that there was something wrong. They couldn't quite put the finger on it, and they heard about C4SB, and they heard about the one of the projects that we have called the IBB project, and they searched us out at the trade show in Orlando, and that evolved into this pilot project that we're talking about. So that's kind of interesting because that to me that tells me that not only owners and people who are struggling with data, but people, engineers, and people who are building buildings know that there is a problem and are trying to figure out what to do without knowing exactly what to do, obviously. So,
A crisis. It's a crisis.
precious, there you go.
It's kind of fun also to be able to kind of point out that, hey, they couldn't have done any better five years ago when they started. And then you also kind of point to the industry and say, we weren't really helping you very much as maybe we could have. The way that the industry, whether it's the construction industry or the OEMs of the different components, whether it's windows or boilers or chillers or whatever, have been living in these disconnected silos. And sure, when you build a building, you buy the windows completely separate from buying the boiler or the chiller or the heating system. And so the construction process, again, whether you're doing a new building, which this case it was, or whether you're just renovating doing a major maintenance overhaul or a tenant improvement, the process ends up in this disconnected way. And this building wasn't 100 years ago or 20 years ago. Although the building, I would swore it looked like it was a retrofit because it looks like it's a 100-year-old building. It was built to fit into the neighborhood in downtown Portland.
That's really well thought out.
Yeah.
And to realize that we get to participate in their intended continual improvement of their asset, it's an honor and just it's wonderful.
And one of the things that Anto pointed out is that, or I'll actually put a finer point on it even, is that the PAE, we call it the PAE building, but PAE is actually just a tenant in that building. There's also an architecture firm in there. At some point, there's going to be a coffee shop on the first floor. It's a classic multi-tenant building. But we keep calling it the PAE building because they designed it and they have taken a kind of an ownership in figuring out how do we use this as a model for talking to other people who want to have smart buildings. How do we use this as a model of how to get a smarter building? And that's where when we realized what their intent was of, we're not just trying to fix one building, we're actually trying to fix an industry. And I was like, whoa, that's a big deal. That's a different intent altogether. And but the building itself is actually also very okay. So the fact that it looks like a 100-year-old to me is irrelevant. But what the systems are in the building are very classic. Just like we said before, every building goes through a design phase and goes and uses energy. This one has HVAC. It's got operable windows. It's got some things that other buildings don't, but wish they had, which is solar and batteries and grid connections and composting so that they don't have to put anything out under the sewer. They have rainwater harvesting. They have water heating. They have all the typical things in that building. And one of the first things we did was we started thinking about, oh, let's look at all the brands of the solar inverters or the brand of the electrical submeters or whatever. And we realized that that's not as important as thinking about each as a system. And so there's the electrical system, there's the HVAC system, there's the water, there's the plumbing, and thinking of them a little bit more generically of how do I specify the interoperability, or more specifically, how do I specific specifications? How do I specify what data and information I want from the water heating system or from the solar panels? How do I, regardless of the vendor and regardless of what was actually at the PAE building, we thought of it as, how would you specify that I want water heaters that do this, or I want composting bins that do that, or I want HVAC that provides this information, so that it can be a model for not not a tribute to that building or look how smart that one building is, but you can have one too. You know, it's
Yes. And it's the
And
system.
this is where the whole sort of silo comes back in, because each of those systems that Rick was talking about is effectively a silo, right? And what's sort of interesting is the PAE knew that there was data in each of these silos. There's no shortage of data. It's just where they are, and the fact that the data in one silo was built to be used only by that silo. So there's no consideration that someone else could actually use data across silos, because that's not typically done, because that's actually one of the things that we need to change in terms of behavior, is that we need to figure out how to make silos work with each other, because silos are, as you expressed earlier, silos are where we get good stuff done, where we get expertise and experience and everything else.
And now we're in the part of evolution of human thinking and living that we're able to start bringing the silos together again. What Rick was saying, we do have new technologies and abilities to break down the silos while still supporting the expertise that's developed in silos.
Just a specific example, getting into the weeds a little bit, because these guys actually they wanted a sort of a universal view of the building. They didn't get it because they didn't know how. Shouldn't say they didn't know how. They tried to specify that these things should all work together and leverage each other. They tried to, but the industry was not necessarily very cooperative. And I'd like to point out my friends in the lighting business at the PAE building. Okay, so there's lights on every floor. Shocking. There's light fixtures on every floor. The lighting contractor decided to take all that information from the lighting system and they put it into their own interface, in a proprietary interface that shows a floor plan of every floor, where all the light fixtures are. If it had been specified for them to not draw their own floor plan interface, but to use the floor plan interface that was already being used by the HVAC people.
Excellent. All right, so you just tied together our series so far. So specifying a data structure that allows the sharing is key. Having a business process model to say why we want to be sharing the information leads to the Linux Foundation codes of being able to allow smart assets to talk to each other, talk to reports, talk to the grid. And it's beautiful to watch. And I thank both of you for what we've done so far. And I look forward to so much more together in the future. So thank you both. And thank you to the audience for sticking around and listening to what we would have been telling our congressional staff members if we were going to be there next week. But we'll go to DC and we will bring this pilot project and others to them. And we will be saying that it is possible to write legislation that includes simple language to move society in a better direction. It's a big picture, but we're working with the Linux Foundation. We are now chairing a United Nations AI and digital tools task force, which can be a distribution channel for the Linux Foundation work that's being done. And things are coming together in ways that give us a lot of confidence to include other people and other ideas. So please reach out and get involved in these types of activities. Thank you, Anto. Thank you, Rick, for being with us. Thank you for your lifelong work. And we'll see all of you next week. We've built up the PAE pilot project, and I'm sure you're interested. All right. Bye for now.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Thank you.